Hi, can I help you?
So,
Quite cuss. They know where we are.
In the quiet of a summer night, the sound of laughter can hide the sharpest screams. The Carter family, Mark, Sarah, and their two kids, Lily 12 and Ben 8, drove up to Lakeview, a small town by a calm lake surrounded by thick woods. They'd rented a cabin for a week to escape the city. Mark, a tired accountant, wanted peace. Sarah, a nurse, needed a break from long shifts. The kids were just excited to swim and roast marshmallows. The cabin was old but cozy, with creaky wooden floors and a big window facing the lake. The air smelled of pine and water. They unpacked, laughing as Ben tripped over a suitcase. That first night, they sat by the fire, telling silly stories. Lily swore she saw a shadow move outside, but Mark said it was just a deer. Sarah agreed, though she glanced at the window a bit too long. The next morning, they went to the lake. It was sunny, and the water sparkled, but something felt off. The beach was empty, even though it was peak summer. No other families, no boats, no noise, just them. Ben found a weird carving on a tree, a circle with a slash through it. Looks creepy, he said, but Sarah brushed it off as kids' graffiti. That night, as they ate dinner, the power flickered. Mark checked the fuse box, but it was fine. Then they heard a low hum, like someone whispering far away. Lily clutched her fork. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Sarah nodded, but said it was probably the wind. Mark locked the doors, just in case. By midnight, everyone was asleep except Sarah. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She looked out the window and froze. Across the lake, 4 figures stood in the dark, staring at the cabin. They didn't move. They just stood there, their outlines barely visible in the moonlight. Sarah's heart raced. She woke Mark, but when they looked again, the figures were gone. The next day, the family tried to enjoy the lake, but the air felt heavy. Ben kept asking about the figures Sarah saw. "Maybe it's ghosts," he said, half joking. Lily rolled her eyes but stayed close to her parents. Mark found a rusty knife half buried in the sand. He tossed it into the woods, not wanting to scare the kids. But Sarah noticed his hands were shaking. That evening, the humming returned, louder now. It wasn't the wind. It came from the woods, steady and rhythmic, like a chant. The family sat in the living room, pretending to play cards, but no one could focus. Then, a knock at the door, sharp, deliberate. Mark grabbed a fireplace poker. "Who's there?" he called. No answer. Just another knock, slower this time. Sarah peeked through the window. Her breath caught. Standing on the porch were 4 people, 2 adults, 2 kids. They looked exactly like the Carters. Same clothes, same faces, same everything. But their eyes were wrong. Empty, cold. The doppelgänger. Mark smiled, holding a knife just like the one Mark had thrown away. The Carters stood frozen in the living room, staring at the figures on the porch. Mark gripped the poker, his knuckles white. Sarah pulled Lily and Ben close, her heart pounding. The doppelgänger. Mark raised his hand, mimicking Mark's stance, but his smile was too wide, like a mask stretched tight. The other 3, Sarah's double, Lily's, and Ben, stood still, their heads tilted at the same odd angle. "Don't open the door," Sarah whispered. Mark nodded, but the knocking came again, slow and heavy. The doppelgänger, Sarah, stepped forward, pressing her face against the window. Her eyes locked onto Sarah's, unblinking. Lily whimpered, and Ben buried his face in Sarah's side. "What do they want?" Lily asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," Mark said, trying to sound calm. He backed the family toward the kitchen, away from the windows. The humming from the woods grew louder, vibrating through the cabin's walls. Then As suddenly as it started, the knocking stopped. The figures stepped back into the dark and vanished. Mark checked every window and door, making sure they were locked. Sarah kept the kids in the kitchen, pouring them juice to keep them calm. "It's just a prank," she said, but her voice wavered. Ben sipped his juice, his eyes wide. "They look like us," he said. Lily nodded. "They weren't right, though. Their faces, they were wrong." The family didn't sleep that night. They stayed in the living room, the lights on, listening for any sound. At dawn, Mark checked outside. The porch was empty, but he found something carved into the wooden railing. The same circle with a slash through it, like the one Ben saw on the tree. He didn't tell Sarah. She was already scared enough. The next day, they tried to act normal. Mark made pancakes, though the batter was lumpy because his hands shook. Sarah took the kids to the lake, but she kept looking over her shoulder. The beach was still empty, the water still. Lily tried to skip rocks, but she kept dropping them. Ben stayed close to Sarah, clutching a stick like a weapon. Around noon, they saw them again. The doppelganger stood across the lake, watching. They didn't move, just stared. Mark shouted, "Go away!" But his voice echoed uselessly. The doppelganger Mark raised a hand, waving slowly, copying Mark's earlier gesture when he'd waved at the kids. Sarah grabbed her phone to call for help, but there was no signal. "That's impossible," she said. "I had bars yesterday." They hurried back to the cabin, locking themselves in. Sarah suggested leaving, but Mark pointed out the car keys were missing. They tore the cabin apart, checking drawers, pockets, even under the couch. Nothing. "Someone took them," Mark said, his voice low. Lily started crying. "It's them, isn't it? Those people." That afternoon, they heard footsteps on the porch. Mark grabbed the poker again, but when he looked, no one was there. Instead, they found a newspaper on the doorstep, yellowed and brittle, dated 20 years ago. The headline read, "Lakeview locals report strange sightings." Sarah skimmed it. It mentioned families seeing shadow versions of themselves near the lake, followed by disappearances. The article ended abruptly, like it was never finished. The humming started again at dusk, louder and closer. The family sat at the kitchen table, eating cold sandwiches because no one wanted to cook. Ben pointed at the window. "Look," he whispered. Outside, the doppelgangers were back, standing in a perfect line, holding hands. They didn't knock this time. They just stood there, swaying slightly, like they were waiting for something. Sarah noticed something new. Her doppelganger was wearing her necklace, a cheap silver chain with a heart pendant she'd lost years ago. "That's mine," she said, her voice barely audible. Mark's doppelganger held the car keys, dangling them like a taunt. The kids' doppelgangers held toys Lily and Ben hadn't played with in years, a stuffed bear, a broken toy truck. "They know us," Lily said, her voice small. "They know everything about us." The Carters barely spoke as they sat around the kitchen table, the doppelganger swaying figures still visible outside. The humming from the woods pulsed like a heartbeat, making the air feel thick. Mark clutched the fireplace poker, his eyes darting to the windows. Sarah held the old newspaper, rereading the article about shadow versions and disappearances, her hands trembling. Lily and Ben sat close together, staring at the floor. "We can't stay here," Sarah said finally. "We need to find help." Mark nodded. "The town's not far. Maybe there's a phone or someone who knows what's going on." They decided to walk to Lakeview's small town center, a mile down a dirt road. Mark carried the poker, Sarah held a kitchen knife, and the kids stuck close. The morning was gray, the sky heavy with clouds. The woods were silent, no birds, no wind, just the crunch of their footsteps. Ben kept looking back, expecting to see the doppelgangers. Lily clutched her mom's hand so tight it hurt. The town was a ghost town. A few old shops lined the main street, a diner, a gas station, a general store all boarded up. The only sound was a creaky sign swinging above the store. Mark tried the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the shelves were half empty, covered in dust. Cans of beans and faded cereal boxes sat untouched. A calendar on the wall was stuck on July 2005, 20 years ago. Hello. Mark called. His voice echoed. No one answered. Sarah found a rotary phone behind the counter. She picked it up, but the line was dead. Figures, she muttered, then wandered to a bulletin board where yellowed flyers advertised lake picnics and fishing contests. One flyer caught his eye. A missing person poster for a family of 4, with the same circle land / symbol scribbled in the corner. "Mom, look at this," Ben said, pointing. Sarah read it, her face paling. The family's description matched. "There's the parents, a girl, a boy. This is creepy," she whispered. Lily tugged at Mark's sleeve. "Dad, I hear something." They all froze. A faint hum, like the one from the woods, came from the back of the store. Mark gripped the poker and led the way to a storage room. The door was ajar, and inside, they found an old man sitting on a crate, whittling a piece of wood. He looked up, his eyes cloudy but sharp. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice raspy. "They don't like visitors." "Who?" Mark asked, stepping forward. "Who's they?" The old man didn't answer. He just pointed at the floor, where the circle land / symbol was carved into the wood. "They've been here longer than us," he said. "They wait, they watch, and they take." Sarah's stomach twisted. "Take what?" The old man didn't answer. He just pointed at the floor, where the circle land / symbol was carved into the wood. "They've been here longer than us," he said. "They wait, they watch, and they take." Sarah's stomach twisted. "Take what?" The old man smiled, showing crooked teeth. "What's theirs?" Before Mark could ask more, the humming stopped. The silence was worse. They heard footsteps outside, slow and deliberate. Sarah peeked through a crack in the boarded-up window. The doppelgangers were there, standing in the street, staring at the store. They held the same objects: Sarah's necklace, Mark's keys, the kids' old toys. But now, the doppelganger Sarah opened her mouth and spoke, her voice a perfect copy of Sarah's. "Come out," she said, her tone flat. "We just want to talk." The doppelganger Mark stepped forward, mimicking Mark's walk. "It's safe," he said, in Mark's voice. The kids' doppelgangers giggled, but it sounded wrong, like a recording played too slow. The old man stood, grabbing a rusty crowbar. "Don't listen," he hissed. "They lie. They always lie." He pushed the Carters toward a back door. "Go, now." They ran, bursting out into an alley behind the store. The humming started again, louder, following them as they sprinted back to the cabin. When they got inside, they locked the door and shoved the table against it. Sarah's hands shook as she hugged the kids. Mark checked the windows. The doppelgangers weren't there, but the car keys were on the kitchen table, right where they'd looked before. "How?" Mark whispered, picking them up. They were cold, like they'd been outside all night. That evening, the family ate canned soup in silence. The humming never stopped. Lily drew the circle land / symbol on a napkin, staring at it. "What does it mean?" she asked. Sarah shook her head. "I don't know, but we're leaving tomorrow. Keys or no keys." But as night fell, they heard it again, footsteps on the porch, and then a voice, Sarah's voice, clear as day, coming from outside. "Let us in. We're family." The Carters huddled in the living room, the fireplace poker in Mark's hand, Sarah clutching the kitchen knife. The voice outside, Sarah's voice, kept talking. "We're cold," it said, soft and pleading. "Let us in. We're your family." The words were so much like Sarah's that Lily started to cry, confused, then gripped her hand, whispering, "It's not, Mom. It's not." Mark motioned for everyone to stay quiet. The humming from the woods was deafening now, vibrating the windows. Then the doppelganger Mark spoke, his voice identical to Mark's. "Sarah, you're tired. You've always been tired. Let us help you. Sarah's breath hitched. It was something Mark had said to her during a fight years ago, when she was working double shifts. How did they know? Lily's doppelganger spoke next, her voice high and sweet. Lily, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. Open the door. We can be friends. Ben's double added. Ben, I have your truck. You left it behind. Don't you want it back? The toy truck's wheels squeaked, like it was being rolled across the porch. Sarah shook her head, tears in her eyes. They're trying to trick us, she whispered. Mark nodded, but his face was pale. He moved to the window, peering through a crack in the curtains. The doppelganger stood closer now, just a few feet from the door, their faces blank, but their mouths moving in perfect sync with their words. We need to leave, Mark said. Now, we've got the keys. He grabbed the car keys from the table. Still cold to the touch, the family crept to the back door, avoiding the windows outside. The car was parked where they left it, untouched. Mark unlocked it, and they piled in Sarah in the front, the kids in the back. He turned the key. The engine sputtered, but didn't start. He tried again. Nothing. Something's wrong, Mark muttered. Popping the hood, he got out, shining a flashlight from the glove box. The battery cables were cut clean through, like with a knife. Sarah gasped, looking around. The doppelgangers were gone from the porch, but the humming was louder, coming from all directions. Back inside, Mark said, his voice tight. They ran to the cabin, locking the door behind them. Sarah checked the windows, her hands shaking. They did this, she said. They don't want us to leave. Ben found something under the couch's small, leather-bound notebook. Its pages yellowed. He handed it to Sarah. It was just there, he said. She opened it, her eyes scanning the faded handwriting. It was a journal, dated 2005, from someone named Clara, a mother who'd come to Lakeview with her family. She wrote about seeing shadows that looked like them, hearing a hum, finding the circle land / symbol everywhere. The last entry read, "They want our lives. They've been waiting underground. The lake hides it." Sarah dropped the notebook, her hands cold. "Underground," she whispered. Mark read the page, his face grim. "What does that mean?" he asked, but no one had an answer. They tried to stay calm, eating stale crackers for dinner. The kids sat on the floor, drawing to keep busy. Lily kept sketching the circle land / symbol, her pencil shaking. Then drew the lake, adding dark shapes under the water. "Maybe they live there," he said, pointing at his drawing. Sarah forced a smile, but her stomach churned as night fell. The doppelgangers returned. They didn't knock this time. They stood on the porch, silent, holding hands. Then they spoke, all at once, in the family's voices. "We're you. We're better. Let us in." The words overlapped, creating a horrible chorus. Lily screamed, and Sarah pulled her close. Mark barricaded the door with a chair, but the handle rattled. The doppelgangers pushed, the wood creaking. "They're trying to get in," Mark said, his voice breaking. Sarah grabbed the kids, backing toward the bedrooms. The humming stopped, replaced by a low, guttural sound like a growl. The door shook harder, and then silence. Sarah peeked out. The porch was empty again, but on the floor, just inside the door, was a single page torn from the journal. It had one sentence: "They come from the tunnels." The Carters stared at the torn journal page on the floor. The words "they come from the tunnels" burning into their minds. The cabin was silent, the humming gone, but the air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. Mark picked up the page, his hands unsteady. "Tunnels," he said, looking at Sarah. "What tunnels?" Sarah shook her head, clutching the kids. "We need to know what this means. If there's something under the lake, it's why they're here." Lily's eyes were wide. "Are we going to find it?" she asked, her voice small. Ben hugged his knees. "I don't want to go underground," Mark paced, still holding the fireplace poker. "We can't just wait for them to break in. We need answers." Sarah nodded, though her stomach twisted. They decided to search the cabin for anything about tunnels. They started in the living room, pulling books off shelves, checking under rugs. The kids looked under furniture, their hands shaking but trying to help. Lily found a loose floorboard in the corner of the bedroom. "Dad, look," she called. Mark pried it up with a poker, revealing a dusty metal box. Inside was a folded map, brittle and faded, labeled Lakeview tunnels. It showed a network of tunnels running under the lake with an entrance marked near the cabin. There was also a photo of a family, 2 parents, a girl, a boy smiling by the lake. On the back, in shaky handwriting, was written, "They took our place. 2005. Sarah's breath caught. "This is Clara's family," she said, remembering the journal. "The ones who disappeared." Mark studied the map, his face grim. "The entrance is by the dock. We could find it." They ate a quick breakfast of cereal, the milk sour, but no one complained. The kids stayed close, drawing nervously on scrap paper. Ben sketched the map, adding the circle and slash symbol he couldn't stop thinking about. Lily whispered, "What if they're waiting for us down there?" Mark and Sarah decided to check the dock. They left the kids in the cabin, locking the door and telling them to hide under the beds if they heard anything. Mark carried the poker, Sarah the knife. The morning was foggy, the lake barely visible. The dock creaked under their feet, and they found a rusted hatch half hidden under a pile of leaves. The circle and slash symbol was scratched into it. Mark pulled the hatch open, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel. A cold, damp smell wafted up, like wet stone and something sour. "This is it," he said. Sarah hesitated. "What if it's a trap?" Mark shook his head. "We need to know what they are. We can't keep running." They climbed down a rickety ladder, their flashlights cutting through the dark. The tunnel was tight, the walls rough with carvings of the circle and slash symbol. The air grew colder, the humming faint but growing louder. They found a larger chamber, its walls lined with old crates and rusted tools. In the center was a stone slab, etched with the same symbol, stained dark with something that looked like blood. Sarah gagged, covering her mouth. "What is this place?" she whispered. Mark shone his light on a crate, finding papers inside blueprints labeled Lakeview Experiment, 1985, that described a project to mirror human consciousness, funded by some company no one had heard of. The last page said, "Subjects escaped. Containment failed. Shadows remain." Before they could read more, the humming stopped. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel behind them. Sarah grabbed Mark's arm. "They're here," she whispered. They hid behind a crate, their flashlights off. The doppelgangers entered the chamber, moving slowly, their steps perfectly in sync. They didn't speak, but their heads turned, like they were searching. Sarah's double paused, sniffing the air, her eyes glinting in the dark. Mark motioned to leave, but Sarah's foot scraped the floor. The doppelgangers froze, then turned toward the crate. Sarah's double smiled, her teeth sharp. "We know you're there," she said in Sarah's voice. Mark grabbed Sarah's hand, and they ran back toward the ladder, the doppelgangers. Footsteps closed behind. They climbed out, slamming the hatch shut and piling rocks on it. Back in the cabin, the kids were safe but terrified. "Did you find it?" Lily asked. Sarah nodded. To shake and to speak, Mark locked the hatch with a chain from the shed. But the doppelgangers' voices came through the wood. "You can't hide," they said together. "We're already inside." That night, the family barricaded the cabin doors and windows. They ate cold beans, too scared to light a fire. The humming was back, louder, coming from below the cabin now. Sarah found another journal page under her pillow. It read, "They don't just want our lives. They want to be us." The Carters sat in the dark, the cabin's lights off to avoid drawing attention. The humming from below the floor was relentless. Shaking the walls, Sarah clutched the journal page that said, "They don't just want our lives. They want to be us." Mark held the fireplace poker, his eyes on the barricaded door. Lily and Ben huddled under a blanket, their faces pale. The air smelled of dust and fear. "We can't stay here," Sarah whispered. "They're getting closer." Mark nodded, but his hands shook. "The car's useless. The tunnels, maybe there's another way out." Sarah hesitated, remembering the cold, dark chamber. What if they're waiting down there? Before they could decide, the door rattled hard. The chair barricade groaned. The doppelgangers' voices came through, overlapping in a horrible chorus. "Let us in. We're better." The words were sharp, like knives cutting. Through the silence, Lily whimpered, and Ben grabbed her hand. "They sound so real," he said. Mark stood, gripping the poker. "Stay back," he told the family. He moved to the door, peering through a crack. The doppelgangers were there, their faces pressed against the windows, eyes wide and unblinking. Sarah's double held her necklace, twisting it slowly. Mark's double dangled the car keys, smirking. The kids' doubles held their old toys, rolling them on the porch like they were playing. The door shook again, the wood splintering. Sarah grabbed the knife and pulled the kids to the bedroom. "Hide," she whispered, pushing them under the bed. She and Mark shoved a dresser against the bedroom door, but the main door gave way with a loud crack. The doppelganger stepped inside, moving slowly, their steps silent on the creaky floor. Mark swung the poker at his double, but it dodged, grabbing his arm with unnatural strength. Sarah stabbed at her double, but the knife barely grazed his arm. The doppelganger Sarah laughed, a hollow sound. "You can't stop us," it said in her voice. The kids' doubles crawled toward the bedroom, their movements jerky, like broken dolls. Sarah screamed, "The tunnels!" She yanked the kids from under the bed, and the family ran to the back door, toward the dock. The doppelgangers followed, their voices echoing. "You can't leave. You're ours." Mark led the way, clutching the map from the metal box. The hatch by the dock was still chained, but the chain was loose, like someone had tampered with it. They climbed down the ladder, the kids crying but moving fast. The tunnel was colder now, the air thick with that sour smell. The humming was deafening, coming from deep within. They reached the chamber with the stone slab, its dark stains glinting in their flashlight beams. The blueprints were still there, scattered on the floor. Sarah grabbed one, reading as they moved. It mentioned a containment breach in 1985, where shadows were created to mirror human lives but turned violent. Trapped under the lake by the town's leaders. They were experiments, Sarah said, her voice shaking. They made them to be us, but they hated it. Mark nodded, pulling the kids along. There's another exit on the map, by the lake's edge. They ran through the tunnels. The doppelganger's footsteps closed behind. The walls were covered in more carvings of the circle and slash symbol. Some scratched so deep they looked fresh. Ben tripped, scraping his knee, but Sarah pulled him up, her heart pounding. Lily clutched the photo of Clara's family, her hands trembling. They found the exit, a rusted grate leading to the lake's shore. Mark kicked it open, and they scrambled out into the fog. The lake was still, the woods silent. They ran toward the road, hoping to flag down a car, but the doppelgangers emerged from the grate, moving faster now. Mark's double lunged, tackling him to the ground. Sarah swung the knife, cutting his arm. It hissed but didn't bleed. Sarah's double grabbed her, its grip like ice. "We're the real ones now," it said, its face too close, its eyes empty. Lily screamed, throwing a rock at the doppelganger. It stumbled, and Sarah broke free, pulling Mark up. The kids' doubles circled Ben and Lily, but Mark swung the poker, keeping them back. They reached the road, panting, their clothes torn. A truck's headlights appeared through the fog. Mark waved frantically, and the driver stopped an older woman with a weathered face. "Get in," she said, glancing at the woods. "I know what's out there." They piled into the truck, the doppelganger stopping at the edge of the trees, watching but not following. The woman drove fast, not speaking until they were miles away. "They've been taking families for years," she said finally. "The town let it happen, kept the shadows fed to keep them contained." Sarah's stomach turned. "Why us?" she asked. The woman shrugged. "You were here." They reached a gas station, the first sign of life in days. The family sat in the truck, eating vending machine chips, too shaken to talk. The woman gave them her phone to call for help. As they waited for a tow truck, Sarah looked at the photo of Clara's family. The girl in the picture had Lily's eyes. Back at the cabin, the doppelganger stood by the lake, holding the family's things, the necklace, the keys, the toys. They didn't speak. They just waited, their faces blank as the humming started again, softer now, like a promise.